I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is TRILLOQUY, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. Scott, I'm already learning a lot about myself producing this podcast with you, especially when we have different guests on that say different things.
Say more.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there a guest that has said something in particular so far that's kind of stuck with you, for the weeks that follow?
The one that leaps out is your interview for this week, because the Phantom from Ilharmonic and his wife, the Phoenix, I think it's a great metaphor for what we're trying to do here with the podcast. If I were to go back a little bit, listening to the interview with Kathleen Bradbury, the producer from Performance Today.
Yeah.
Just a perspective that I just really don't have, and there was a lot of eye-opening things that she said from a queer perspective that I've just been, I've been out of the theater world for a little bit, so I've been out of touch from that, and so
you've been out of touch with your gay friends, your queer friends, from being out of the theater.
Yeah,
that's a common trope of the arts in general, but maybe we've talked about it here before. In classical music, there aren't usually that many queer people in an orchestra. I remember in my former orchestra, there were, I think, I'm going through the sections quickly in my head. I think there were 5 of us total. Mm-hmm. When in a whole orchestra, you would think there would be more. But
by law of averages.
Yeah. But in the theater world, I guess y'all are a little gayer than we are, huh?
I'll be the one to tell you there are some gay. There's a few involved in theater and film
and good for them. And shout out to all of them. When I was thinking about some of the poignant moments I've had with some of the guests, I'm thinking back right now to Brandon Kofer's interview where he talked a little bit about how social media is just the highlight reel. He was talking about that in the context of perfection and, letting people see that, you aren't perfect and you make musical mistakes and all that sort of thing. And I've been thinking about that more on a personal level because, the things that we share on social media are usually the happy things or the exciting things. There have been many studies that say we post the things we want people to be jealous of us for, which is something.
Look at me.
But with that in mind and with Brandon Kofer's words in mind, I've been experimenting with being a little more honest on social media, kind of putting it out there that it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to, kind of be in your feelings sometimes, whether gray clouds make you sad or you're just going through a stressful time at work or whatever. We don't always have those conversations, and that honesty to emote is something else that the Phantom talks about in today's interview.
There's an episode of Portlandia where Fred takes this woman on a surprise trip to Italy, and there's loads and loads of them having all sorts of fun, but really it was a terrible trip. And one of them says, I guess on social media everybody's just cropping out the sadness.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like we have these mini therapy sessions. Just quickly, when you say cropping out the sadness, how much of that do you do in your personal life, whether it's social media, your real life interactions? Do you find yourself cropping out the sadness?
I don't post often enough for anybody to really get a feel, maybe once a day. And it's been largely to promote stuff here at work, like Hop Notes and TRILLOQUY and, whatever I'm working on. Although recently I did put a picture up of Radar when I first got him, because we had our gotcha day earlier on, and I put a picture of him up and a little piece of poetry about dogs that's in our neighborhood in the concrete. And I started to cry. Yeah. So it happens. But I've also gotten into a mode of thinking where people don't want to hear my crap. Yeah. And I think that Facebook is a terrible place to be all, woe is me, or vague booking, booking.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I try
terrible.
But nothing is specific.
Right. So then there's all these comments with just question marks. What's going on? And they never answer.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, I think.
And we are definitely going to get, we have a lot to talk about as far as hip hop and how the Philharmonic Orchestra mentions that with classical music. But since we're here on this conversation, there is an oboist who I used to play with in Los Angeles, and I remember she posted on her social media at one point. She went to the store to get something, and she went up to the cashier, and I guess that she was looking a little down or whatever, and the cashier asked her, "Is everything okay?" And she just burst into tears right
Just
there.
because somebody asked.
Just because somebody asked.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know, you mentioned vague booking. Sometimes you don't know exactly what's wrong. Sometimes you just know that you're feeling a little blue, and the smallest thing can just set you off. So, yeah, so I've been using my social media to be a little more honest. There have been some blue days, but it's all going to be great. And I think thank goodness for outlets for people to have to reach out to friends that may not be in their direct periphery that they can still reach out to, or maybe you just need to cast a wide net. And I think it's okay sometimes to ask your Facebook, your timeline, whatever, to just think about you or whatever, because you're having a rough time.
I'll try it. I'll try it with you, but it's going to be tough because I've got it set in my mind that people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not what it's for, or I'm supposed to be putting up pictures of radar or glasses of beer or whatever. But
I enjoy seeing how clear your beer is.
I'm telling you,
yeah,
it's all about clear beers.
Yeah. So of course, music can help with your mood and company and all that. And lately, hip hop has really been very therapeutic to me as far as really listening to what these artists have to say, finding similarities and commonalities. Of course, just being black, I'm going to have a certain proximity to hip hop music, considering black culture and all that sort of thing. But, really going back and listening to some of these older artists has been a part of my everyday, and it's been really therapeutic.
You've been hitting Nina Simone a lot, you said.
Yeah, I was listening to her this morning. She did a really great job about recreating a lot of these old Rodgers and Hammerstein tunes. She would cover the Beatles really beautifully. And there's this one song she sings called "Feelings," and I'm forgetting who sings that right now. Should I sing it and maybe somebody will?
Feelings,
nothing more than feelings. Who sings that?
To forget my
feelings of love.
We'll find it.
Yeah, but so while you're doing that, I'll just say her rendition of that is so beautiful, and when I'm in my feelings, it's good for me to listen to that. And when I think about Nina Simone and everything she stood for, I think about the phrase "black classical music" because that's how she framed what she did. And when you talk about what Nina Simone did, blues, jazz, on into the evolution of hip hop, you have to consider hip hop one of those genres of classic black music, classical black music. Before we get too far, did you find the name of that?
I did. The name of the artist, I never would have gotten it. Morris Albert.
Morris Albert. So shout out to him for writing such a beautiful song. Of course, shout out to Nina Simone for recreating it really beautifully.
There are studies out there that show there's something that happens in the brain that when you are feeling down, listening to music that's sort of melancholy makes you feel better.
Yeah.
That, or it can be a catalyst for you to let out that emotion, as a release,
and to get, I'm working hard, if you can't tell, to keep the music tracked toward hip hop. A lot of it is not melancholic or, melancholic sounding, but it just speaks to an experience that I feel like I have to a degree, or it speaks to a community that I feel like I'm a part of. And it almost feels like I'm engaging with family in a way. And that's something I really loved about my conversation with the Phantom and the Phoenix, was that it felt like I was talking with family for a little bit,
Yeah.
and we've of course developed a relationship over the years, to where the Ilharmonic is a family, and we don't all always see each other all the time, but when these different performances happen, it's like a mini family reunion every time. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really great to speak with them.
You were talking about music to fit the mood, music for whatever mood you happen to be in.
Yeah.
And we were talking yesterday about how for me, music can be like a bookmark or a thumbtack. You put a, a point of remembrance in just a feeling, in a mood.
Yeah.
And that Love by Kendrick Lamar has become part of a cozy, comforting, reassuring sort of a feeling. And then when the Phantom started talking about all of these old MCs that were popular when I was listening to hip hop first in the late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah.
it just warmed me up. I felt like immediately like a hominess about it
There's
because
a nostalgia attached to it.
because he was talking about KRS-One and Chuck D from Public Enemy, and these were artists that I was listening to and brought up to you later on. Where has this style gone? The people that are pointing out the inadequacies rather than the ones that are, it's always about money or sex or degrading in nature.
Right. Right. And the Phoenix in this in our conversation, she touches on that. She talks about how money has really shifted a lot of hip hop, and it's not so much about your message and what you want to put out there as much as it's about getting money, period. And a lot of the music is still great. I would say most of the music is still great. I listen to the new hip hop artists just as much as I go back and listen to the older ones, but there is again a bit of nostalgia connected to some of that classic hip hop that you just don't really get anywhere else, and that's where a lot of their sound and a lot of their music lives, in that bit of nostalgia, which they'll talk about. But I guess we should talk a little bit about who they are, who you're going to hear me speak to today. So back in 2015, I think, I was on Twitter, and somehow I got connected to this guy called the Phantom, who is trying to raise money for a hip hop show in Carnegie Hall. So, I contributed. I thought it was a great idea. And then he also put out a call for musicians. He was looking to really grow his orchestra. So what he asked people to do was take a more rap styled song and a more R&B styled song and put your spin on it with your instrument, just so he could see what you were capable of. Mm-hmm. So what I did, I took my bassoon and I found we should actually look at this sometime. I found a guitar, an acoustic guitar sort of backing cover of this song by Chris Brown and Nicki Minaj called "Right by Your Side," and I just played the melodies along with that. So that was sort of the song on the more rap side of things. And then I also recorded myself doing a rendition of John Legend's All of Me. And I sent those to him. And he thought they were really dope. So I flew up to New York City and took part in their in their performance at Carnegie Hall, which was, the third time I'd been in Carnegie. It was really exciting to be there in that capacity as someone, holding a bassoon, playing hip hop. And as they say, the rest is history. I've gone on to perform with the Ilharmonic Orchestra on different college campuses. I played with the Ilharmonic for the at the Kennedy Center for the New Year's Eve celebration. I think we were ringing in 2017 that year. That was really energetic. That was really fun. And they continue to travel around the country, bringing some musicians with them, picking up others along the way. And they'll be in the Twin Cities soon. So I thought it would be great if we heard from them and had a bit of conversation about the way they mesh classical music with hip hop, and all of the stories therein. So I think this will be a really fun one to listen to.
One little tip that I want to give you as you listen: this was recorded through the web and
three different locations.
Yes, 3 different locations. So taking advantage of technology to bring you this interview with the Phantom and the Phoenix from Ilharmonic. track.
Yeah, there are some bumps and some a few
Bumps and
noises,
grinds.
some bumps and grinds. But yeah, you're gonna like this. So to sort of as we began talking, where I'll have you listening pop into this conversation, in prepping to speak with the leaders of the Philharmonic Orchestra, I listened to a lot of their music as well as some of the rappers of days past. One of these big artists who will come up during the interview is Nas, and one of the biggest. How can I say, Scott? One of the big albums in hip hop. One of the most popular and one of the most legendary ones is one album by Nas called Illmatic. So that's where this conversation starts, and Jeff, aka the Phantom, begins by talking about the relationship between what he does and this legendary album. So here we go.
Illmatic is my top 5 hip hop albums of all time, and the musicality of it was way ahead of its time. And I don't think something like that has been captured on a hip hop album since. You have some of the greatest producers of all time. You have Premier, you have Pete Rock, you even have Q-Tip, and they made such a cohesive project. And it feels like sort of it was predestined, because Nas was coming up, as the next great MC. He was the young Rakim, and all these guys just jumped in the studio with him. And a project like that can have the ability to come off, mishmash or hodgepodge, but they
Right.
threw it together, and it was very cohesive, and it has a very musicality, a music element to it, that has kind of been unmatched, and it was way ahead of its time in the '90s for them, to be doing stuff like that. But it was, yeah, that's why it's one of my favorite hip hop albums of all time.
And you mentioned Rakim Phoenix. I thought of you a couple weeks ago. Eric B and Rakim came to the Twin Cities and did a show. I couldn't make it. I had to work, but my boyfriend went, and he described it as just a really mature show. And everybody's rapping, every lyric, but no drama, no fighting, no clout, whatever. Just a mature show. Where has that gone? Where has that gone in hip hop? And I ask you because I remember the last time we spoke, you put Rakim in your top 5.
Absolutely. That is something that I think we attribute a lot to the commercialization of rap music and hip hop. And over time, a lot of those elements have been lost because it has become more about the next big thing and making money. And when they realized that they could really capitalize on hip hop music and that they had something that could be turned into dollars, it became very materialistic, and it became about what would sell and for the sound of the moment.
Commodified, right?
Absolutely. And I think that over time, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of the artists have moved towards chasing the dollar. And so, the sound has become whatever it takes to have that big radio hit is what they're doing, no matter the content, no matter what's being said, no matter whether you're degrading yourself. That's just what it became when you have something becoming a commodity. And it's unfortunate because, people like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, and even Nas, it had a poetry to it.
Right.
There was a skill to emceeing. And now very few people really still MC. And the stuff that you hear on the radio that's commercial, they're not what we would quantify as MCs.
Right, right. But, how does that, when we talk about the commodification of hip hop and chasing the dollar, what does that conversation mean in a world where today we're celebrating Hove, celebrating Jay-Z for being hip hop's first billionaire? How can we celebrate on one hand and in the other hand, sort of wag our finger at how it's become all about the dollar?
So for me, that's a great question. So for me, when I think of Hov making $1 billion, I think of longevity, not necessarily the because he's a lot of his early money was made in making records that talking about clubs that you and I can't get into, right?
Yeah.
And if we could, he wouldn't want to be a part of those. Like I get that aspect, but when we look at, when we look at Dr. Dre and we look at Puffy and we look at Jay-Z, their quest is more about the longevity. And going back to your previous question, the people you describe at that concert, like that's Generation X. The 35 to 55-year-old who grew up in hip hop's golden age. Hip hop has rebranded itself over and over again as a youth culture, when the people who made it weren't in their 16, 17-year-old. These were grown, these were adults, 25, 35-year-olds who were making the stuff, and it was urban culture, not necessarily youth culture. Hip hop has done a great disservice, and the music industry itself has done a great disservice by forgetting about Generation X. Those people didn't die off. They didn't stop buying records. They would just stop marketing to. When you go to one of those Rakim shows or Big Daddy Kane shows or old school LL Cool J shows, Generation X is there in droves buying tickets.
Absolutely. You will see very few young people at one of those old school concerts.
Right. 16-year-olds will give you a bunch of streams and clout, but adults are going to, make sure that you do what it is that you have to do to pay your bills.
And it's so interesting when you talk about paying attention to Generation X, because in classical music, what we deal with is getting the new generation's attention, and it seems like you figured out a way to sort of do both in a clever way, an interesting way.
Yes, I mean it has become not a goal for us, but it's become something that has happened over time as we've branded ourselves as a hip hop orchestra. Our largest demographic has become, that Generation X, 35 to 45 and 55. What they do is they remember the music from their childhood, and now they have children who play the cello or the piano or the violin, and they bring them to the show. So it's a way to, grab the older crowd and to introduce their music of their youth to their children.
And the truth of the matter is that, to Phantom's point, those people didn't stop wanting to be, they didn't stop wanting to be marketed to. That's just how it occurred, that they sort of became the forgotten generation. Those people still want to go to concerts. They still remember what it was like to sit at their first concert and see, an artist that they admired up on the stage. And they still want that. They want that feeling of nostalgia. And as we move further and further away from a time that feels or felt more simplistic, I think there's a desire from that age group to want to be able to go to events like that. They want to be able to go to those sort of, go and be in those sort of settings.
And that's what the Philharmonic concerts feel like to me. I feel that energy of appreciation and that energy of nostalgia that makes, someone who's younger like me have an even better appreciation for a lot of those hip hop styles that came before. So for someone who's never heard of the Philharmonic Orchestra, never heard of a hip hop orchestra, how would you describe it to them?
I think it's a combination of all those things. So in addition to just hip hop and classical music, there's soul, there's jazz, there's R&B, there's some blues elements, there's some opera elements. So it's really a combination of all the musical influences that have influenced us as we've grown up, the music that we grew up listening to, and the music that we enjoy making. And we put it out there for the audience to enjoy. I think when you come to one of our concerts, what you get is a full concert experience, and we welcome you making noise, clapping your hands, stomping your feet, getting up and dancing and enjoying the music with us. We enjoy making it, and we enjoy when the audience enjoys it.
And the best way to sort of describe that is, it's like basically the feeling of an old school house party in a concert hall. It's that call and response. It's having that audience participation. It's that feeling of family and friends and being in those settings that where they used to do music back in the day, and not being afraid to emote. Right. So that's huge. So, Phantom and I talk about that all the time. I mean, I can't tell you the last time he and I have been to a quote unquote club, but the last time we were in a club setting, you notice that people don't really dance anymore. They don't connect with the music in the same way. It's a lot of people standing around, trying to look the part, trying to pretend to be something that they're not, and they're just there for the sake of
being seen.
Being seen.
Exactly, just for being seen. But there's no real connection to the music. And when we bring a show to a Carnegie Hall or to a Kennedy Center, we want people not to be afraid to get out of their seats and to make noise and to act like they're at a party, because that's essentially what we're trying to bring to you. We're trying to bring both elements together. That classical element with a twist, with a hip hop twist.
And just for the record, it's really dope to get to say that, name your Kennedy Centers and your Carnegie Halls, like, you've been there, done that, but it's so funny that you bring up that concept of not being afraid to emote, because I'm, in the car earlier today, Phantom, I was listening to one of your albums, and you go into that exact thing in one of those intros, not being afraid to tell your truth.
Absolutely. You have to. And Phoenix speaks about connecting with the audience, and when the audience when they get it, that makes the line that you poured over for 40 minutes trying to make sure that they understand the similes or the story that you're telling. It makes it that much more poignant. When you get that connection, you can look down in that audience and see someone looking at you, and they get your punchline, or they're listening to your story, or they're looking at all the elements that you have on stage. That's what makes it real for us. That's what makes it enjoyable for us, and giving that emotion. We've been to many operatic concerts, and people sit on their hands and wait for the cue to clap. That's not what we're trying to. We're not trying to provide that experience.
Right. And one thing that I always hear you say and see you talk about on social media is how it's not a one-off. A lot of these people will do, one orchestral thing or do something with a violin to be a sort of novelty, but
Right.
you guys are really dedicated to the mixing of those genres. Why are you so dedicated to that?
Well, I think growing up and seeing something like Soul Train, and seeing people who look like me on stage playing instruments, and then my mother putting me in flute and piano lessons, and Andrea's mom giving her music lessons and things like that. We recognize the importance of representation. When we're at a place like the Kennedy Center, and 80% of the audience looks like us on stage, and kids are out in the audience, and they see someone looking like them playing the cello. That's important. That's a moment. That's what we want to try to bring. Our ensemble is not totally African American, but there's a large representation, and we recognize the importance of that. And then it's just the sonic quality of live music that you can't really get. And that's why when these guys are doing these huge concerts, they're going for an orchestra. They recognize that the sound is a different sound, and it's an awesome sound. So every time that we perform, this is what we do. This is who we are, and we're true to the music. Like I record, or every time I make a piece of music, it's with an orchestra in mind.
Yeah.
And, just to circle back to your question about the one-offs, it's not a dig. It's just our reality, right? So we've been doing this for so long now. And aside from even the amount of time that Phantom and I have been performing together, for him, sonically, this is how he always heard the music. So even in the 80s, when he was a kid, this was always how he heard this sound. And no one was doing that. And so even though early hip hop music has elements of piano and things that might sound like violin and stuff like that. They weren't necessarily recording with live instruments. Those sounds
Right.
were coming from a keyboard sound. You know, a lot of that was
Right.
coming from a keyboard sound. But this was always how he envisioned the music. And we love a Nas, we love a Common. I mean, all respect. Trust me, they're two of our favorite artists. I'm just throwing them out there as examples. Um, but when we perform, every single time we perform, this is how we perform.
Yeah.
Even when we were just performing at the club level, imagine Phantom and I going into a dark club with a string quartet in the people were looking at us like somebody coming in with a cello and a double bass. They're looking at us like we're crazy. They're like, what is this? So it's never been a gimmick or hey, let's just see if this looks good. This is how it's been envisioned, and this is the legacy we want to carry forward. This is such, it seems like a novelty now that everybody wants to jump on stage with an orchestra. We're like, yeah, we kind of saw that back when nobody else was really giving it any attention. And they don't perform that way all the time. And they definitely are not necessarily in the recording studio with a string section,
Yeah, I want to hear more about one of these first club performances with you guys and a string quartet. Surely there's a story that sticks out from one of those early
Oh,
performances.
so
There's
in
definitely a
Philadelphia,
story.
we did a performance with we were paired with some members of the Philadelphia Orchestra, if you can imagine. First chair violinist Gloria Justin and three other musicians, and we had a club show, and I think we were doing I think we were doing one or two songs. And we paid heftily out of pocket to drag four members of the Philadelphia Orchestra
Yeah,
out
sure.
to this club to do two songs, and we come in and there's people performing on CDs or DAT tapes, and it's a little crazy, and then we come up and you have to plug in these instruments and set up the microphones, and we come in and people are looking at us like we're crazy, like we're highfalutin, or that's not hip hop, or
Okay, yeah.
so, when we get on and we rock it, man, and people were still hating. So it took a while for it to catch on, but we knew early on that this was the sound that we wanted, and this was the sound that we were going to stick with. But it was
It was not
it
an
was
easy road.
it was not an easy road by any stretch of the imagination.
From either side, not from the classical community and not from the hip hop community. They were all kind of giving us side eye.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
kind of, they were definitely giving us side eye.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get to was that some of the side eyes on the hip hop side had to have been there on the classical side too.
Oh, for
Absolutely.
sure, for sure. The musicians themselves, early on they didn't want to play 8 bar loops of Vivaldi or Beethoven or whatever I was chopping up at the time to make the music. They weren't extremely impressed. The first time we performed at the Kimmel Center in Philly, there was a line around the block. We wound up drawing more people than Itzhak Perlman, and
Oh
the
wow.
musicians weren't happy about it. This isn't real music. But we knew we had something. Like, we piqued the interest early on, and this was before marketing or any of that, or before we were marketing savvy. Like, the Kimmel Center just announced there's going to be a hip hop group with an orchestra. And people came in droves,
Yeah.
and so we knew early on that this was something, but neither side gave us any cooperation. No one wanted to work with us. We didn't, other people were getting, um, you know, endorsed by local artists, but no one gave us a pass. No one wanted to work with us. No one did anything. So everything that we did, we literally pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and worked hard to get to where we are.
And believe it or not, even back then in early 2000, there were some people who were younger than the norm of what you expect the classical community to look like that recognized, hey, if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose classical music if we
Yeah.
don't start finding a way to bridge the gap. Um, there were people who realized, with all due respect, classical music was considered old white man's music. And
Yeah.
they realized somewhat early on, hey, we need to start bridging this gap and we need to start bringing younger crowds to to a classical show. And how do we do that? We need to find ways to pique the interest and to fuse classical music with other genres, with visual arts, with other genres of music, and those people got pushed back too. It was very much frowned upon, and the powers that be at the time were very skeptical about it working. Although they gave it a shot, they very much in the background, like, yeah, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. But they wanted to at least be able to say, hey, we gave it the old college try. So I think that that's sort of been a struggle for a number of years, recognizing that eventually this music may die out if you don't find ways to bring diversity into the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and just speaking to that, I think the last time I played with you guys was at the Kennedy Center, and after that performance, I got a couple messages from these two sets of black parents saying that their kid plays the bassoon, nobody in the household knows what that thing is, and but it was really cool for them to see a black person on stage playing bassoon, and then
Yes.
on top of that, music that they could relate to culturally. So
Right.
it's really phenomenal what you guys have managed to do on the path, going from the small club gigs all the way up into Carnegie Hall and the Kennedy Center. Was it a gradual climb, or was there like a one big, a one big discovery moment, or what?
So there was, I mean, it was definitely gradual. We went from clubs to college concert halls, up to the point where, we raised our own money to perform at Carnegie. We produced our own show. But it took a while from
And just the third hip hop headline show there, right?
Absolutely. The other two were Wyclef and Jay-Z. So we're in pretty good company there. But from '99 to when we first performed with a string quartet until 2015, it was definitely gradual. Getting our music out there through college radio, performing on college campuses, and knowing that my one of my dreams was to perform at Carnegie Hall. I actually took the leap 3 separate times. I tried to raise money, and then in 2015 we were successful. We produced our own event there, and it was a tough labor of love, but that performance was extremely stressful, but it was extremely rewarding. It was one of our finest shows, sonically, spiritually, artistically. Like a lot of things came together, and that's kind of been the model that we've used to forge forward.
And to Phantom's credit, your ego can take a real beating over like a decade of trying diligently and hard to work your craft, and it's seemingly falling on deaf ears. And that Carnegie show was definitely it was a pinnacle of a long journey and a lot of work and a lot of no's. And he just never gave up on that dream. And he because he knew that was something that people needed to see. That was something that we had to get out there. And the fact that we never gave up after 3 tries, it was, it's definitely to Phantom's perseverance. A lot of this is due to his perseverance.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not like it was, an empty house or half full. These shows are packed, and the energy is just so intense. And I just can't help but to think, what if that was more representative of what the orchestral experience is, because at the end of the day they are being exposed to classical music just in a more updated way. And I bring that up because with a lot of these classical music organizations across the country having to cut parts of their season, and there being budget issues, it
Right.
seems like something like this would sort of be the obvious next step into where to take these organizations.
But it's
Yeah, I
but it's
mean,
not though. It's not. You would be surprised that there's still so much pushback from concert music halls, because it is a generation of people that just do not want to relinquish that sort of persona. And where they're failing is in thinking that by accepting something different, you're saying the other thing is not existent or that it's not important. And that's really not the case. There's room for everyone. And I think where these big orchestras and these symphonies are failing is because they only feel like there's room for them. And because of that, they're losing out. They're losing out on patronship. They're losing out on bringing new audiences, because what happens when someone comes to a concert hall and they see a hip hop and classical fusion? Maybe that's going to spark an interest for them to say, "Hey, such this orchestra just came up and it's a classical orchestra. Maybe I'll go check that out too." You have to bring people to the space. You have to show them the opportunity and show them that the other things exist, because if they don't even know they're out there, they're not necessarily even going to be looking for them.
yeah, I mean, the one of the main ideas, in addition to bringing musicians of color into the space, what we pride ourselves on is bringing audience members of color into the space. And
And
that's
ultimately culture of color.
absolutely, and that should be something that these classical organizations strive to do. But what they've done is just continue to try to rely on their 50, 60, 70-year-old patrons who are coming to see Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for the 50th time, instead of trying to get a younger audience or trying something to invite people into the space. When we did the Kennedy Center performance, you can see people who had never even been to that space
Yeah.
come in the door, look around, look amazed, and just be enthralled. So it was an entire experience for them. The same with Carnegie Hall. These people had never felt invited into that space. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to make people feel good about being included into these things, into these spaces, and they should be. But until these organizations make that a goal, that's not going to happen, and they will continue to suffer financially for it.
And on the more, I guess, on the more hip hop side of the conversation of being inclusive, a lot of people think of it, or traditionally, it's been thought of as this male-run thing. But
Right.
in pop hip hop, these days you're seeing a lot of women taking the lead. But in the Ilharmonic, just as it's headed by the two of you, I would say half or more of the ensemble is filled with young women.
You want to take that, Phoenix?
Um, yeah, and honestly, I don't even know that that is extremely intentional on our behalf, as much as it has been the musicians that have gravitated towards us. So when we put these opportunities out there, um, and people come forward, it happens to be that a lot of especially the string players, tend to be women. And they're very excited about the opportunity. And it's a good feeling to turn around and look on stage and see all of these beautiful people of color, women, men. It's a really great feeling to see that. And it's something that we hope continues.
Yeah, for me, I think it's amazing. I think it's great. My wife is dope. Let me just say that. The musicians are dope, and I love it that a lot of the musicians are women and women of color. I think it's a great representation because women of color are kind of forgotten in this society. So when we go into these spaces and we're not just men of color, we're showing that women of color can do great and extraordinary things. And my wife takes over that stage, and she gets out there and she connects because there's a lot of women of color in the audience, and she connects with them and they connect with her. And I think it's amazing, and I'm always amazed and shocked and thrilled that since my wife is taking a much larger role in this ensemble, how we have flourished, because of that. So I'm all for it.
Phoenix, I'm going to read a couple of your bars here. You describe yourself as part feminist, militant, part heroine, villainous. When I hear these words and I think about us in this hashtag Me Too era, there's such a power behind, what you do that instantly, of course, reminds me of, Queen Latifah, reminds me of Lauryn Hill and all of these powerhouses, powerhouse women in hip hop days past. And being as polite as I can be, women in hip hop don't necessarily exhibit that so much these days. I mean, what can you say to that topic? I'm curious.
Specifically the two women that you mentioned, they were extremely unapologetic about their blackness and about their womanhood. And they were people that other women looked up to, other young women looked up to. Like Queen Latifah is definitely more my childhood era, and Lauren is more of my college era. And when I say when you talk about how dynamic both are and continue to be, they were people that I looked up to because they just exhibited so much strength and confidence. And Lauren's a perfect example. Lauren was in a group. And from the moment that you heard Lauren rap, you knew that she was the standout of that group. From the moment she opened her mouth, way back in the day when they released Vocab, she was the star. And she was the person who made people want to turn around and listen to them. Again, the commercial, hip hop has become so commercial, and it's become more about sex sells.
Yeah.
And women feel, unfortunately, even in 2019, like the only way they can get leg up, So,
no pun intended.
No pun and no pun intended, is to present themselves in a way that's overly sexual, and not even overly sexual. Sometimes just downright vulgar and disgusting, and it's just it really very much plays into a patriarchal society of feeling like that's the only way that you can make a way for yourself is to be overtly sexual. And it just sort of continues to play into stereotypes that that play over and over and over again, and it's unfortunate that women feel like they have to put themselves in that position to be heard. I think that there's a very fine line between being sexy and being feminine, and being vulgar. When I get on stage, I wear heels on stage. I'm a girl. I like sparkly stuff. I like shiny things. I wear my jewelry. I wear my corset. But when I get on stage, I'm not a vulgar person.
Right.
And when you see me on stage, what I'm presenting is a woman of strength and confidence, and of femininity. And you can do all those things without exploiting yourself.
And sort of stereotypes is something that I think classical and hip hop really share. On the classical side, it's all boring, it's all X, Y, and Z, and on the hip hop side, it's nothing but calling women X and X and whatever. I want to ask you this, Phantom. to kind of quell some of those stereotypes about hip hop and what it is as a genre, where would you point a new listener, someone who wants to understand what the real hip hop is? What do they need to listen to? What artists do they need to go back and look up?
For artists back in the day, I would definitely start with wordsmiths like Rakim and Big Daddy Kane and Slick Rick, KRS-One, Public Enemy. Those are kind of Mount Rushmore type hip hop artists. Each of them had their own special skill. Slick Rick was a storyteller. Rakim had flow. Big Daddy Kane had metaphors and similes, and Chuck D was, he was fight the power. Now I would think some of those people who have kind of picked up the mantle would be like J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Childish Gambino, Lupe Fiasco, and
Yeah.
and people of that ilk who have taken some of those skills and put their own spin on it. I think hip hop, if you search for it, has those elements that it had in the '80s and the '90s that made it so great. It's just that the balance is not there. The balance is out of whack. The radio stations are playing a certain type, and they're back in the day you could hear Public Enemy, you could hear NWA one right after another on the radio station. Now it's just mumble rap, and they'll just play it same six songs over and over. I think if you search for it and you really care about the culture, you can find things even in this age that are being made that will remind you of how great hip hop not only was, but how great hip hop can be.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's like the music, the hip hop that you fuse with the classical at your shows kind of exhibits some of the more of the of the message behind the hip hop and the purpose behind the hip hop, and not, as you described, just mumble rap. So
Right.
it's like the Philharmonic Orchestra is classical music on the when we talk about instrumental and all that stuff, but also classic when it comes to hip hop, classical black music.
Absolutely, that's what we strive for. The classic part of that in classical music and classic, like that's what we strive for. I've never attempted to make a song that was hot. I've always attempted to make a song that would be considered a classic.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. So how can folks look you up, find you, and get information about your upcoming shows?
So they can find us on www.thephantomhiphop.com. So TheePhantom hiphop.com.
Wow, thank you. Well, Phantom Phoenix has been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much for your
you.
time,
Thank
man.
you, Garrett. As always, thank you for having us.
The Phantom and the Phoenix from Philharmonic in conversation with Garrett on Triloquy.
That was a fun conversation. I really enjoyed doing a deep dive of hip hop. I don't get to do that too often.
Yeah, I have to say that it was nice for once to recognize some of the names.
Hey, good for you. Good for you. I'm sure your years of a party DJ helped.
Well, yeah, from the late 80s, early 90s, and then anything after about 1998, it just drops off pretty dramatically.
Something I thought was particularly interesting that I want to retouch on again briefly is the idea of stereotypes behind music. So when we talk about the stereotypes with classical music, it's boring, it's slow, it's sleepy time music, whatever. And then on the other side, for hip hop, you have the stereotypes of, all you're doing is calling women names, and it's all about gold chains and money and shooting and whatever.
Yeah.
And the Philharmonic just in a really brilliant way demystify both of those stereotypes for these seemingly opposing genres of music, and then puts it together into this really incredible experience.
That's part of their goal, is to bring the Gen Xers back into the concert hall and help people to discover new music that they might not even have known that they liked.
Yeah, and we can't take for granted the space, as Jeffrey was saying, we can't take for granted the space that this music lives in. For someone to have gone to the Kennedy Center or Carnegie Hall to hear this hip hop orchestra, just the idea of going into those spaces has been demystified. Am I allowed in here? What should I wear? Am I going to feel comfortable? So one of the many reasons why what the Philharmonic Orchestra does is really important.
You've traveled to play with them, and very soon you're going to be traveling once again, aren't you?
Well, I'm always traveling, but earlier this summer, I traveled down to Arkansas, like I do just about every summer, to play in the Artisphere Festival, one of the many classical music festivals around the country. And that area is special in that they're small, but they're really interested in the arts and really enriched by not just music, but visual art and nature and all that sort of thing. And one of the women really driving that is Katie Henriksen, who works at the local public radio station there. She's the area's only classical host. She does a lot of writing about classical music. And on the next opus of TRILLOQUY, I'll be chatting with her and learning more about her story and what she has to say about classical music and all of that these days.
I think you're going to be surprised at some of the classical music and art that's happening in Arkansas. So be listening next time on TRILLOQUY.
So, Scott, we've talked a lot about the Philharmonic Orchestra, the Phantom, and the Phoenix, but I figured that we would close this opus out by actually hearing some of their music. They own the publishing and the rights to everything that they have. So, closing out today's opus of TRILLOQUY is the Philharmonic Orchestra featuring the Phantom and the Phoenix in a tune they call Double Trouble.
Phantom's the mic, magnificent, most vicious, a written shit ripping and turn your dream into an isolated incident. Kill it with no remorse and you'll be fortunate to witness it. Teach a course to get you endorsed for poison and penmanship.
Listen, my style's unlimited. Bad mamma jamming, club card carrying membership. Any scene, I'm feeling it. Part feminist, militant, part heroin villainous. We need a TV show so you can know how real it is.
The truth is you feeling it's on the face, you conspicuous to deny it's ridiculous. Admit it is so. Poetry so precipitous, full of dope deliciousness. When asked to buy a ticket, you should grip it and go.
Forget what you know, no PMS, sick with the flow. Kicking the dough, rip through a show and split with the dough. Off the rip, no, I'm hip to it, bro. Seen it before. Acting shady, I'm a lady and I'm strictly a pro. And yo, me and the Phantom, yo, we blowing the spot. Cause we're double trouble and we're bubbling high.
Yeah, me and the Phoenix, yeah, we blow on the spot. Cause we're double trouble and we're bubbling high.
Cease and desist, so you'll see to exist. I'm too patient with the most lethal and see the shit. If the police try to get me to flip, yo, I'll be pleading the fifth. Keep it legit, I'm a beast with the spit.
Nobody's laughing at your jokes, I'm trashing what you wrote. Matter of fact, leave you gasping as I have you in the yoke. Psychopathic, I'll be clapping as I'm slashing through your throat. Straight massacre your whole brand ambassador dope.
You know my pedigree, flow on point and carry a melody. Rocking the mic steadily, what the hell is you telling me? Don't ever let me think that you gelling me. Better let it be heavily set. Disrespecting Phoenix is a felony.
Insane flower, chain hang lower, your game's over, remain sober. Give rappers a hangover, membrane blower. Better rapper than this, don't near know her. Hit you with the flamethrower, escaping the Range Rover. And yo, me and Phoenix, yeah, we blowing the spot. Cause we're double trouble and we're bubbling high.